Support for the Bittersweet Life comes from our listeners. If you love this show, please support it. Visit patreon.com/The Bittersweet Life Podcast. For as little as $5 a month, you can listen in on stories and topics that we don't get to on the main show. That and live meetups, handwritten mail, so many more perks. You can read all about it there. Patreon.com/The Bittersweet Life Podcast. And the other good news is you get to support an independent show. A show that has no financial backing from any corporations or any big pod conglomerates. We depend on our listeners to keep this show going. And right now we have a goal of $1,000 a month. If we can count on you and other listeners to bring in $1,000 a month, will really help steady the show and let us hire the help that we need to keep it going. If we reach the $1,000 a month goal, you'll get to hear a special broadcast of the X-Files podcast, the EX-Files, a pilot show I created where two people who were once in a relationship together and aren't anymore share their views of what went right and what went wrong, and we see how their accounts lined up and how they didn't. The couple I interviewed are extraordinary and very insightful, and you will not believe the things that they disagree on. It's fascinating. Once we hit that $1,000 mark, we're going to release that over on the Patreon for members who support this show. Right now, we are under $900. We're getting close, but we're still under the $900 mark. There are a lot of you listening. We need just a few of you to listen to the call and take action. $5 a month or more will make it possible for this show to continue. Patreon.com/The Bittersweet Life Podcast. There are links in the show notes. Thank you to the 137 of you who are already supporting this show. And I can't wait to say hello to those of you who decide to become the newest supporter. Thanks. Welcome to Rome. This is The Bittersweet Life with Katie Sewell and Tiffany Parks. Hello, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katie Sewell.
I'm Tiffany Parks.
Tiffany in Rome, Katie in Seattle. And today, Tiffany, I'm going to toss it to you. You're going to introduce today's topic.
Well, Katie, I think that all of us who travel regularly, we all have those little things that we take with us when we travel that are comfort items. And I don't mean necessarily a favorite stuffed animal, like my son who travels with his kiwi bird.
Very nice.
But for most of us, I mean, I guess I'm only speaking for myself here and someone who I recently saw on Instagram who felt the same way. I bring something that has to do with my morning caffeinated beverage of choice.
Which is, I could guess.
I think you could easily guess, Katie.
Tea of some kind?
Yes. Black Indian tea. And then I have to have milk in it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, like so many of us, I think it's pretty universal. We all have our preferred morning drink, and I don't know, I'm very, very attached to mine, and I don't like things to be different. I don't I like it the same way every morning. I mean, I might have like Assam tea instead of Darjeeling. Like that's about as much as I'm going to mix it up. But but I want that good. And I mean, I'm happy with I'm not a snob about it. I'm happy with a bag of Twinings English breakfast. If that's all I've got, I'm happy with that. But it's got to be black English tea of a decent quality, and there's got to be milk in it.
Okay. Not the easiest thing when you're traveling from hotel to hotel, quite honestly.
No, that's why I travel with it. I always travel with it, with the tea bags. At home, I don't use tea bags. I use loose tea. But like I said, I'm fine with the tea bags when I'm traveling. Whenever I go to the States, I bring enough just to get through those first few days. And then, of course, go to the supermarket. But, when you're traveling further afield or you're going to a place where you don't have family that you're going to be staying with and a supermarket that you can stop by, I definitely bring enough just in case.
Can I ask another question? Are you a person who brings things that are kind of, I mean, that's a ritualistic thing that you enjoy every morning. But what about something that's like the vitamins you take every morning? Do you travel with things like that too? Or do you think, a week off of the vitamins, who cares?
Yeah, I'm definitely a week off type of person.
Okay.
Definitely.
All right. Just establishing the baseline here.
Yeah.
Pleasure, not responsibility.
I forget to take my vitamins most days.
Okay. Fair enough.
So yeah, that's really the only thing. I mean, obviously I have my creature comforts. I have my things that I really love that, I quote unquote can't live without, but absolutely can live without while I'm on vacation.
Sure.
But tea is kind of like, non-negotiable, or it has been up until recently. So I was watching this woman who I know on Instagram, and she was sort of saying the same thing, only that she's in Italy because her husband is from here. They live in the States. And she was sort of showing her like very American, non-authentic coffee ritual and what she puts into it, and it's very non-Italian. And she kind of said, I know everyone's going to yell at me in the comments and say, you're in Italy, drink the Italian coffee. And I do, and I love it. But I also love, this is a comfort thing for me. And I totally got it because that's how I feel about, my tea. But on the other hand, and I actually commented about this in a nice way. I only make nice comments, almost only. I did say something like, I always travel with English breakfast tea, but I'm about to go to Japan and I'm going to push myself to only drink Japanese tea when I'm there. And I don't like it. That's the hard part. It's not like, oh, I'm like Indian tea, Japanese tea, sure, it's all good. It's all tea. I actually don't like it. I don't like Chinese tea either. But then again, there was a time when I didn't like Indian tea. There was a time I didn't like tea at all. And I've developed such a taste for it. I love it now that, maybe the benefit of all this will be coming to love something new that I didn't like before.
True. And so you're not going to put in one single English breakfast tea bag into your bag.
Well, that's my goal.
I challenge you now. I'm challenging you not to.
Yeah, I mean, and if I did do it, I tend to travel with a couple bags of decaffeinated tea for the airplane because I want to have that comfort of a nice cup of tea on the airplane, but I don't want to be kept awake by it. But if I decide to do it, even if I bring one for the airplane, I will save it for the airplane. I'm not going to cheat.
I have a totally different side note, and then I'll come back to the idea of how this ritual is actually comforting and how it could be a good thing to leave it behind. But since you're such a big tea fan, I wanted to ask you, and it's probably not something you've experienced, but have you ever been what you would consider tea drunk before?
I've definitely felt a couple of times like I've had too much tea today. Is that what you mean? Like I have too much tea in my belly right now.
Well, I have learned that this is an actual thing. So years ago, when I was responsible for producing a 2-hour daily morning show on NPR, we once did an entire hour about tea and brought in various tea experts that had certain expertise. The people who knew about the black teas, the people who were really into the Japanese and Chinese green teas. This whole panel of people, we got really in the weeds with it. And we drank so much tea during the course of this hour. And at the very end of it, I don't even know how many cups of tea I'd had by that time. At the very end of it, one of the guys is like, well, let's try a matcha, which, is the really green one that they whip up with a whisk.
Yeah. That's the kind Claudio likes. And
yeah,
I think
it's good. It's good. But of course, this is what tipped me over the edge. I drank the matcha tea. The hour ends. After the show, we would always have a meeting about what was happening the next day and what shows we needed to prepare for it in the weeks to come. And the host of the show is walking this panel of tea experts out, and I'm sitting there with the assistant producer of the show, both of us just having finished this matcha tea. And I realize, as I'm sitting there at the computer looking at everything we need to talk about, that I feel like I'm drunk. Drunk. Like I'd had a couple martinis,
Really?
Yeah. And I look at him, and he has kind of an odd look on his face, too. And I said, do you feel like you're drunk right now? And he said, I do, actually. And so I got up out of the chair, and I ran after the panelists of tea experts. And I said, I feel like I'm wasted. And one of the tea experts laughs and says, oh, you're tea drunk. Yeah, that happens. And I said, so you guys are sitting around these tea parlors, drinking all this tea, and you're not just sober? Like, this is something that can actually happen? And he's like, yeah, it can happen. Like, if you have too much. And I was just like, that is nuts. So then, of course, we were like, maybe instead of a meeting, we should go to lunch, because apparently we've drank too much tea to be in the office, which is just an absurd statement to make, I think. We've drank too much tea to be in the office. We're not going to, everyone's going to know we're wasted. And so we left and went out for lunch, all of us together, feeling terribly weird. But yeah, who knew that this is something that can happen if you take it just a little bit too far?
Well, I've never heard of that, and I've never experienced that. I guess I thought you meant like, just having had too much tea. I've definitely felt like, oh my God, my stomach is like full of liquid right now, just like gurgling from how much tea I've drunk. But I've never noticed it have that effect. Mm-hmm. Not yet. I haven't got there yet.
Well, maybe something to aspire to while you're in Japan. So going back, though, to the idea of taking things that are ritualistic comfort with you when you travel or when you're abroad, like it sounds like your friend on Instagram is over in Italy for a while because her husband's from there. And so bringing some of the creature comforts from home. If that's something that you usually do, why this time, as you prepare to go to Japan, are you thinking that this time you will not do it?
Well, first of all, I was just thinking about this recently. I don't think that I have been out of Europe or North America in, I don't know, I can't even remember the last time. Mm-hmm. I think it's been like since before I met Claudio.
Okay.
I really don't think.
And you met Claudio like what, 20 years ago?
No, not quite. 2008. So yeah, I think I was in Asia in the year that I met him, 2008. That was the last time. So that means I have not really been out of general Western culture. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, obviously there is a big cultural difference between the United States and Europe, and obviously within Europe, but the general sense of Western Europe, I have not been out, or Western civilization. I have not been out of it in about 15 years. Mm-hmm. And so when you travel, like when you go to Austria, for example, or France, yes, of course, in France, there's a much stronger coffee culture than tea culture. But you can get tea in France, and tea is widely drunk, Indian tea, classic black tea with milk is widely drunk in France, just like it is in Italy, even though it's not an Italian thing. It's not a French thing. Mm-hmm. But it is a very British thing. And we're all part of, it's all part of the Western civilization. Whereas going somewhere that is so utterly foreign, like Japan for me, I think that it makes less sense to chase after those aspects of my own culture when I'm on such a short trip. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to die if I don't have my English breakfast for 2 weeks. When you put it in perspective, it's really not a big deal. Mm-hmm. But if I were to, insist on having that tea every morning, I would be missing out, most likely, on trying something that I wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity to try, which is real authentic Japanese tea in Japan. Mm-hmm. I mean, and it's the same reason why, you shouldn't go to McDonald's every day when you're in Italy. I mean, who would really? I can understand one time, but you have to eat, at least a number of times, if not every single meal, the food culture of the place that you're in. Otherwise, you're missing out on so much of the aspect of that culture.
Mm-hmm. That's true. I mean, you're not going to be gone long enough that if you seriously regret it, you can't survive through it.
First of all, I'm sure in Tokyo I can find English breakfast tea. It's not like I'm going to the middle of nowhere. So I mean, I'm sure I'll be able to find it if I'm dying. But the idea is I don't want to get to that point.
Yeah, for some reason I was thinking about because how certain religions or even just kind of trends sometimes encourage us to give up these things that we really enjoy. We talk sometimes about the Catholic Church, around Lent. A lot of Catholic parishioners would try to give up something that they really enjoy for that period of time to feel like they're living on lesser. It's often like more of a sacrifice of give up something you really love, and then when you get it back, it'll be all the more joyful. And I was remembering this young woman, Amina Al-Sadi, who used to work on the show I worked on, who would celebrate Ramadan. She loved her coffee so much. Her love of coffee, Tiffany, reminds me of your love of tea. Like, it was, the reason to get out of bed in the morning. It was one of her great passions. And of course, in Ramadan, because you fast all day and you can't drink anything until the sun goes down, she would have this period of time where she couldn't have that morning coffee. And I would think, if it were me, I always felt bad for her, especially when when Ramadan hit during the long summer, because when it was the height of summer, and it would be like you'd be fasting from 4 a.m. until after 9 p.m. And I would be just starving. I would think, gosh, you must miss food so much right now. And she'd be like, oh, no, it's the coffee. It's the headaches, man. I love the coffee, but the caffeine headaches and the lack of the ritual, it's the worst. That's the hardest thing for me to give up. So I always thought that was kind of interesting. And it's probably a good ritualistic practice to break habits like that occasionally, just to, like you said, try something new, but also not become so that you can't live without something.
Yes, it's always good not to have things that you can't live without.
But I mean, I say that like, I'm certainly a person who's very ritualized. And I mean, I love that you bring up that it can be inspiring. It might help you discover something new. I've been thinking a lot more about how a lot of the ritualistic things I do feel like they minimize life. Like life gets more and more dull. Like, I work from home, a lot of times I eat the same stuff for lunch. A lot of times I'm kind of lazy. I don't go further than my neighborhood to get takeout food if I'm living large, and decide to try to do something different than just, I don't know, slicing up another apple and having another piece of peanut butter toast, like whatever I find around the house all day long. And I mean, it's beautiful outside. It's summer, things are blooming. It feels like this is a time of possibility and renewal. And I should be like, woo, I'm out in the world, like you're seeing the birds and the creatures doing, like they're out there being like, woohoo, let's be in the sun. And I feel like here I am through much of the days doing the same stuff that I do in the winter, because one, it's my working life, but also it's the same foods, it's the same places. And I think that those rituals, even if it's the same tea every day, like those rituals can start to be like, make the world smaller and smaller. The possibilities are so limited. And of course, I know that's not true, but it's like the momentum of trying to break the patterns. Some days you feel like, okay, yeah, I'm going to get out there. I'm going to break the patterns. And then other days you're like, well, I don't really want to break the patterns today.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely know the feeling of being like, oh, I'll just do what I always do, because that's so much more comforting on days when you just don't have a lot of energy. Those things, I think, bring extra comfort on those days. But I think that's one of the reasons that we travel.
Yeah.
It's because that forces us to break those routines. And that's another reason why I'm really convinced on doing this, is because why travel if you're just going to bring your old routines with you?
Tiffany here, popping in to share with you a little slice of what it's going to be like on our Rome listener trip this coming October 2024. We're so excited to share our version of Rome with you, our secret, beautiful, and curated aspect of Rome that Katie and I have come to love over the years. We want to share that with you guys because, quite frankly, there's nothing else like it. You're going to be waking up to the sound of birds chirping in the courtyard, the beautiful, lush, flowering courtyard right outside your window. You'll be staying at the Hotel Donna Camilla Savelli, which is a gorgeous early 17th century restored monastery designed by one of the greatest architects of all time, Francesco Borromini. You can have your breakfast in that lush, flowering courtyard with a little bubbling fountain in the background, sipping a cappuccino, having a warm, piping hot cornetto right out of the oven, and all sorts of other yummy treats. And then you'll be meeting up with Katie and myself and the rest of our very, very intimate group. Remember, this is just a very small, select group. We're going to have 10 rooms, and we're capping it at that. 2 people maximum per room. And we'll be heading out into the city, mostly on foot. We'll be exploring and sharing with you some of those things that we have discovered, some things that we are extremely passionate about, and quite frankly, some things that most Romans have never even heard of, much less seen. Just to give you an example, we'll be taking you to an absolutely exquisite little chapel that some people call the Sistine Chapel of the Middle Ages. So beautiful and so little known that when I took my father-in-law there this past summer, and he has lived in Rome for almost his entire life, at least 40 years, he had never even heard of this place, much less seen it. We're going to take you to a place where there are literally 3 levels of history, one on top of the other. And as you walk downstairs, not only are you walking back in time, but you can feel the weight of history on you and smell it in the air as you go underground to explore these places. Katie and I will be with you every single morning of the trip for 5 mornings as we go off, way off the well-trod tourist track in Rome. And we go to places where even though there are thousands and thousands of people in Rome, thousands of visitors, some of the places that we go will be almost completely alone. Works of art by some of the greatest painters and sculptors in history. I just cannot wait to share my passion and Katie's passion as well for these places and for these things with you, our listeners. So if that sounds like something that you'd like to do, if you want to escape from the mundane day-to-day for a delightful week, a magical week in early October of 2024, then get in touch with us. The exact dates are the 6th to the 12th of October, 2024. Email us if you'd like more information. You can write to bittersweetlifepodcast@gmail.com. That's bittersweetlifepodcast@gmail.com. We hope to hear from you, and we hope to see you in Rome in October. Back to the show.
We have our whole lives. We have the whole rest of our lives to do those old routines. I always say, if you're an expat, that's a different story. If you're living a long time in a foreign culture, foreign place, of course, it makes sense to bring along your comforts from home. But when you're just on a 1, 2, 3 week trip, you really should push yourself. And I'm talking to myself more than anyone here.
Yeah.
To explore the local culture, to explore the local food, to explore the ways of doing things that are different. If the country that you're traveling to, they sleep on the floor, sleep on the floor. Like, go for it. You might not want to just keep doing that when you go back home. That's okay. It's not like you have to adopt it as your new life habit.
Yeah.
But it is so helpful to see the way other people do things.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
whether that's in the country next door or the country on the other side of the globe.
Did I ever tell you the story about these people I met when I was traveling in Cambodia? And they were expats from the United States, I think. And they were not living there forever, but they were there with part of an organization that was called the Servants of the Poor. And so they, whether or not they brought any creature comforts from home, I don't know, but they moved into like a local village and into like some structure there. They never were in a hotel. They were never in anything
Expat
that
housing.
Yeah, anything that I would do if I was traveling in Cambodia. They were living amongst the actual people that they were there to assist. Well, so we were talking to them about what it was like when they first arrived. And they were talking about how you come from the United States and you come with kind of this sense of privacy and what you think is your own personal dignity. And they said, one of them said, and I tried to like maintain that for such a long time, keep my own sense of dignity and privacy, keep some of the rituals up that I recognize from home. And then I got terrible food poisoning. The worst that they had ever thought could be possible, where they're up all night throwing up.
Dysentery, basically.
Yeah, basically just like stuff, I won't get graphic, but stuff pouring out of both ends. And all the while, they're just mortified because it's in the middle of the night. It's like 3 a.m. They're making these heaving sounds, these groaning sounds, and they know that where they're living, the walls are paper thin because they can hear other people talking, and they're just like both terribly ill and absolutely mortified that everybody in the village is overhearing this right now. And they just said they woke up in the morning still laying on the ground of their hut or whatever and thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to face everyone once I'm through this? And then there was like a knock on the outside of the hut, and one of the women from next door was bringing over something that was like, here, this should help. This is like a remedy that we use. And then another neighbor came and they brought something else that was their own family's remedy. And other people came bringing like clean clothes and clean water. And, and all these people showed up trying to help. Be like, we've all been there before. This stuff is going to help you get you through. And they said for them, it was a major turning point of, that kind of separation that they tried to hold so strongly onto being an American, to realizing like that kind of vulnerability invited everybody to come in and try to give them a hand. And that really changed the dynamic of how they related to the people who lived there, because now it was more like you were one of them. They'd all gone through something horrible like that sometime, I thought that was a really interesting story.
It is.
And about how sometimes like in travel, like, I mean, you have to completely embarrass yourself to really, make the locals laugh. I'm classic for doing that, especially in Asia.
Yes.
So
I remember your story of the shoes inside.
Yes.
And I got to remember that. Got to remember that story since I'm headed to the same country where that happened.
Yeah, you remember to take your shoes off in those situations. And if everyone's laughing at you and also with you, it's better if you try to laugh with them rather than just be like, and mortified. How could I have done
it? Traveling keeps you humble. That's another reason to travel.
For sure.
It really does. It really does keep you humble.
Yeah.
Yeah. That kind of reminds me, not exactly the same, but I wrote an article once I think it was for the Wall Street Journal travel blog, which no longer exists, called "There's No Such Word as Privacy" in Italian, because they use the word privacy in English because they don't have a word for it. And I wrote that when I had a newborn baby, and I was just thinking about when I was postpartum, those first few days, and my mother-in-law coming over and taking care of me. And what I remember more than anything else was her washing the sheets. Again, not to be too graphic, but you lose a lot of blood after you have a baby. And I was not expecting it. I knew I'd lose some blood, but I didn't realize how much. And it's constant. Like it lasts for a long time. And so I just felt I was like so embarrassed constantly, just like every single morning feeling like, the teenage girl who, stained the sheets, Yeah. But it was like every freaking day. And she'd be like, don't worry, let me change the sheets for you. Let me go take care of this. And I just thought, you know what? I can't be embarrassed by this because A, it happens to every woman who has a baby, and B, she doesn't care. It just doesn't. I would have been probably more embarrassed with my own mom, believe it or not. But in Italy, I think there's less of, like in Cambodia is probably even more of an extreme. But Italy, compared to America, is already, I think, a culture that doesn't value privacy as much.
Yeah, I mean, do you have a sense of why there is no word for privacy? I mean, that seems kind of interesting.
Because they're not very private people, I guess. I mean, there's a word, riservatezza, but that means really reserve. But that's different from privacy. It's not the same thing. So no, I don't know. I mean, but they're not, like I said, they're not very private people. They're much less likely to lock the door when they're in the bathroom, or they're much more likely, I feel, to talk about, like, even this is so simple. When I was growing up, if you had to go to the bathroom, you would say, even as a little child, I was taught this, I have to go to the bathroom. That's what you say. You say, I have to go to the bathroom. In Italy, you say, I have to go pee-pee. Like even grown-ups say this. You have to go pee pee. And it's like I walked into I was at my in-laws a couple days ago, and I just rushed in to grab something or to pick up Aurelia or something, and my father-in-law was sitting there, and I was like, "Oh, hang on one second, I have to go pee pee." And I mean, I said it in Italian. It sounds better in Italian. And then I was sitting there, and I was like, I can't believe I just said that to my father. I mean, it's just like it's just different. It's not a big deal. It's not embarrassing in the way that in America I feel like these bodily functions are almost unmentionable, you know?
Well, maybe to end, since you just said it sounds better in Italian, let's hear it in Italian.
Devo fare la pipì.
Oh, that does sound better. That sounds way better.
Here's what I want to end with, if I can find it. Aurelio had to write a little text. He's finished third grade now, but one of the things they started doing this year was they started writing little mini, what would you call that? And not an essay, like a theme, like a little couple paragraphs of text on some subject.
Okay.
He's got these various subjects that he has to write about. And one of the subjects was he had to write about his mom.
Okay. Yes.
So I'll read this. I'll do an instantaneous translation. So,
okay.
Mia madre è una scrittrice. Si chiama Tiffany. My mother is a writer. Her name is Tiffany. Adora il tè e I libri. She loves tea and books.
I understood that one with my terrible Italian.
Ama Caravaggio. Andare ai musei. Bere il tè e leggere I libri. You want to go? You want to try?
Caravaggio.
She loves
Caravaggio, museums. I didn't catch the other. What was
she loves
part?
Caravaggio, going to museums, drinking tea, and reading books.
Okay. Yes. Yes.
And then, so he has here written in the margin sort of what he's supposed to talk about. So that was the presentation. Now this is the physical aspect. Non è né alta né bassa, ma è snella e atletica. I love this line. This makes me happy. She's neither tall nor short, but she is slender and athletic.
Very nice.
Ha I capelli castani biondi, gli occhi azzurri, la bocca piccola, il naso carino e le orecchie piccole. She has light brown blonde hair, blue eyes, a little mouth, a cute nose, and small ears. Now here's the character. Mia madre ha un carattere dolce, affettuoso e scherzoso. My mom has a sweet, affectionate, and joking character. È piena di immaginazione. She's full of imagination. Si arrabbia poco ed è sempre felice. This is my second favorite line. She gets mad rarely and she is always happy. And then we're back to hobbies, which the presentation was basically hobbies as well. Mia madre beve il tè, legge I libri, e scrive sul computer. My mother drinks tea, reads books,
and writes on the
computer. Ogni sera legge a me, prima che vado a letto. Every evening she reads to me before I go to bed. Si compra miliardi di libri. She buys billions. Is that millions or billions? That's billions. Billions of books. And then there's an asterisk. Papa si arrabbia. Papa gets mad.
Yeah.
And then, Katie, I'm going to show you the picture that he drew of me standing on a pile of books with two other piles of books with a teapot somewhere and drinking a cup of tea and holding a book. So, besides the fact that this is just adorable and sweet, he's not wrong about the tea. He sees me and he teases me and he makes fun of me about how much I drink tea and how and every time I say, I think I'm gonna make a pot of tea, he'll be like, what a surprise.
So you'll have to tell him, Aurelio, we're going to Japan and we're not bringing any tea, and then see what his reaction is.
But he doesn't get that there's like a difference between the Indian teas and the Japanese teas.
That's true.
To him, it's like tea is tea. So he's not gonna understand what a sacrifice I'm making. But hopefully it won't be that much of a sacrifice.
I mean,
hopefully I'll love it.
Yeah, hopefully you'll find that it wasn't a sacrifice at all. You'll just
That's what I'm
find
hoping.
you'll find yourself with a little bag of loose leaf tea that you're putting into your bag as you fly back to Italy.
Yeah. And wouldn't that be fun to be able to mix it up and to be able to enjoy that as much as I enjoy the Indian tea? I would love that because then, I wouldn't get into that routine rut that you were talking about.
Love it. All right, well, we should leave it there. You'll have to report back, of course, how it goes. And one last thing before we go, a follow-up to last week's show about stayers, goers, and newbies. We heard a lot of commentary from those of you living abroad or who had lived abroad about this concept. And we also heard from Sarah, who sent in the article in the first place a few years ago. Sarah, who lived in Morocco. And I wanted to end with a voice memo update from her. So I'm going to play that in just a moment and also remind you that, like Sarah, if you have a topic that you want us to explore on the show, just send it to us. Send us an email, bittersweetlifepodcast@gmail.com. We love tackling what listeners want us to tackle. So send it in and maybe we'll be talking to you next week. Here's Sarah.
Hi, Katie and Tiffany. This is Sarah Gladding, normally of Casablanca, Morocco, but talking to you now from just outside of Cascais, Portugal, where I am vacationing with my family. I was very excited to see your episode on the article, and I saw in the post on Instagram that it was sent to you by a listener, and I thought, oh, I wonder if that was mine. It was from about 2.5 years ago, but I listened to it, and it was me, and I was so excited. I listened to it with my little boys when we were playing at a playground, so I recorded some audio from them as well that I will send separately. We are doing well in those 2.5 years. We have lived more in Morocco. We've done a lot of the things on our Moroccan bucket list. I don't think we'll ever feel like we've done everything we want to do there, but we are actually transitioning now from being stayers to goers. So it was a really interesting moment to hear you talk about that article and reflect on all of that. We have spent 6 school years in Morocco so far. We are teachers. My husband and I are teachers at an international school. And our oldest is now a student there as well. Both my kids were born there. So Morocco has really, really been an important place for us. But it's never felt like the place we were going to stay forever. It's going to be a really hard goodbye. We're not on that 2-year cycle. This is going to be a really big goodbye, so I think it'll last the whole year. We will be there next year. We'll be teaching there next school year, and we're starting our international search now for where we go next. We hope to be in Portugal. My parents retired in Portugal, so they can speak to some of the retiree experience as expats. They retired here in 2018, so our first choice is Portugal. That would be the dream if we can get jobs here. But if not, we'll keep in touch and we'll let you know where we go next and what it feels like to be newbies in a new country. Thank you so much. We really enjoyed listening to this show.
Hi, Katie. Hi, Tiffany.
Hi, Katie. Hi, Tiffany.
Hi, Katie.
Hi, Tiffany.
Hi, Tiffany.
And what are your names?
I'm Sonny. I'm Leo.
What are you guys doing right now?
Jumping
on a trampoline?
And until next time, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katie Sewell.
I'm Tiffany Parks.
Talk to you next week. Bye.
Hi there, this is Scott from Broomfield, Colorado. Full disclosure, also first cousin to Katie, half of The Bittersweet Life. But I have been a voracious listener of The Bittersweet Life pretty much since it started. It's a really great podcast. I know it started out as kind of a travel-oriented podcast, but I love what it's evolved into and how it's a lot more about just life and culture and just so many other topics. I love Katie's journalism background and the amazing questions she asks and her curiosity. And then, of course, Tiffany with her just outstanding knowledge of not just Rome and Italy, but just European culture is such a good combination of people to listen to. Really great podcast for a Sunday afternoon meal prep session where it feels like these two were just having a conversation with you, sitting on the counter, prepping meals with you. Really great. Can't recommend prepping meals with them enough. Huge fan. I hope everyone is giving them money every month. That would be great. And I hope that its podcast goes on forever. Bye.